Our first conversation today looks at how to explore and why cities are creative incubators, and why creatives from all walks of life, musicians, designers, entrepreneurs, and scientists. The biggest myth is that creativity is the province of individual genius. In fact, it's a social process, and cities offer us a platform to take our ideas and to combine and recombine. Today we'll address a couple questions. Does creativity flow from our cities, and how do our cities help us inspire our creativity? Please join me in welcoming Nelly Furtado, our CEO of the Creative Class Group, to a conversation with Grammy Award-winning artist Nelly Furtado to explore these questions.
Hi, Rana. How are you?
Good. She needs no formal introduction, but I do have to say a few things. I'm so honored to be here with you today. I mean, musician, actress, dancer, producer, songwriter. She's sold over 40 million records. That's amazing. We've all heard her singles, I'm Like a Bird, Turn Off the Lights. She's won so many other awards and accolades. I mean, not only a Grammy, but 10 Junos. I mean, that's amazing. Music awards, and she was recently in the Canadian Hall of Fame. And in her free time, she volunteers as an ambassador for Free the Children. And guess what? Yesterday was her birthday, and she's here with us today.
Yes.
So
it was my birthday. Thank you.
I know you left British Columbia as a teenager to move to Toronto to launch your career. Talk to us about that move and why that was so important for you.
I mean, gosh, well, I'm from a small town. I'm from Victoria, British Columbia, and you know, I needed to move at the time. You couldn't really get discovered any other way besides for maybe being in a local talent show, but the repertoire wasn't that great at those. So I wanted, you know, because I was already writing my own songs and collaborating with local musicians. So yeah, I kind of fled to Toronto, fresh out of high school, and I'm very inspired by what Richard was saying, because it means so much to live in a vibrant city like Toronto. It means a lot to live in a growing city like Toronto, because just when you think it's finished growing, it keeps on growing, and it becomes more rich. And then the art scene starts to balance out what's going on economically, what's going on within other aspects of culture. And I do love living in that city, and I haven't left for too long, because it's very inspiring, and it's that mosaic that kind of drives that most definitely. And if you're bored of one neighborhood, then there's another one just sprouting up a block away.
So the small town of Victoria wasn't inspiring your creativity?
No, it definitely was, but I needed. I'll never forget when I think I went backpacking in Europe, you know, that summer, like after a year in Toronto. And after a year in Toronto, after a small town, I went to visit friends in, I don't know if you've been to this place, Helmsley, in Yorkshire, actually, in England. And it's quiet, you know, you think, you know, Mr. Toad is going to come out around the corner. It's like Full Wind in the Willows, pastoral setting. And I remember after a year in Toronto, although I loved nature, as soon as we got to, you know, one of the main towns, it was like a drug in my veins. It was like, oh, I'm in a city. There's a record store. There's this, you know. And it was like, after you experience a city that's rich for the first time, it really becomes a part of you that you start to crave and need.
And being connected to other creative people, how important is that to your work?
Well, it's been a thread for me. It's been a real thread, because what's great for me is when I bring in different artists from around the world to record in Toronto. I've brought in artists from, you know, virtually every continent, you know, and they come to Toronto and they're taken aback by the fact that there's, you know, an amazing recording studio right on the main strip of Queen Street. And they go, wow, is this safe? Like, is someone going to, you know, break in? Like, are we safe here? Because it may come from a more dangerous city. Right. For instance, like artists that I've worked with from Colombia or somewhere like that. So it's this idea of like, wow, how wonderful is that? You know, you can just,
because it's a big city.
And I can leave my house and I can drive there, and I'm there in 15 minutes in this beautiful environment that I can bring in people from around the world. And I'm grateful every day for that, because I mean, I know that's one of the reasons why I do love Canada as well. I do I do feel quite safe, but it's not a cushion for me. You know what I mean? Like I don't. I think anything can happen at any moment. You just have to live in the moment.
And here we are in Miami Beach.
Yes.
And you've been to Miami quite a few
times.
Big
city for me too, yeah.
Yeah, and even though my last name is Florida, I never actually thought I would
Yeah.
live in Florida.
Yeah.
You think of Miami as like fun and sun and muscles and nightclubs, but it's totally transformed. And being here in Art Basel, Miami Beach, what are your views on the city and its creativity and its musical outlets?
I have an interesting angle on Miami. I have like all my in-laws are here and my partner's from Miami. So, you know, I've been coming here for, I guess, 15 years, and I did initially notice that, you know, it is a growing city still, you know, culturally. Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with the sort of the layout and the grid of a city, to be honest. Like, I think sometimes, like somewhere like Toronto or New York, I do feel that a few things come into play with creativity. Like when you talk about music, I hate to jump ahead to your other questions, but with music, you ask, why do you create a certain type of music in Toronto? So like when I first moved to Toronto, it was like, by day I was working customer service at like an alarm company, answering phones, really angry people. And then at night I was on a subway heading downtown so I could like spend my paycheck on a recording, you know, of my songs. You know, I was making trip hop music. And luckily there were grants available for stuff like a music video or whatnot. So that's another element, is grants and financial support, which we're very lucky to have in the city that I live in for a lot of the artists who live. I'm not saying that's a be-all and end-all and everybody can get a grant, but there definitely are resources. And at the time I was an independent artist, but when I was making this music, it's a cold city. So what do you do when it's cold? You stay inside, right? So that informs the type of music that's made there. Also, you're not blessed with like maybe a large garage, you know, because you're not sort of in a city with a larger, with homes that kind of have that type of space, like perhaps, you know, the grunge scene in Seattle maybe partially came out of people having maybe a little more space. A lot of the music that comes out of Toronto, especially that makes it out of the country, it's live instruments combined with electronic music, and the less space you have, the more, sometimes the more innovative you have to become. You're also using, perhaps, you're more confined, so you're more likely to be listening on headphones than maybe making noise,
so
because your neighbors might hear you.
Actual geography affects music.
Yeah, and I've heard that from other songwriters too, where they can't like write their songs in their apartment in New York because their neighbors would complain, you know? Because like, I have a friend who lives on the Lower East Side, and she had to go to like all the way to like Oregon to write, because she's like, I love my apartment, but I can't write there because like the neighbors will complain. And plus artists like to write really late at night, you know. But it's interesting because when I first moved there, I couldn't really live downtown. I guess I couldn't really afford to live downtown. So I actually lived on the subway line, but a bit north. But there is that desire to go back to the things that initially moved you in a city.
Which was?
For me, there was a record store. It's still there. It's called Cosmos, and it's owned by my friend Aki. He doesn't sell anything online. He has every single record memorized.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He has every single record memorized. And he's got 2 shops. And, you know, some of those sounds that he had going on in that first record store, you know, it's a lot of world music, some Afro-pop. There's a lot of Brazilian music, jazz music, psychedelic, everything. So we used a lot of those records as inspiration for my first record. Recently, I was having a bad day, and a couple years back, and I drove all the way from some large store I was at buying like craft supplies or something, and I just beelined it, and I went, I wonder what Aki's doing. And I drove right back down to Queen Street, and I just saw Cosmos, and I was like, I haven't been in here in years. And I walked in, and you know, we started playing records. Yeah, we started playing records, and it was like, oh my God, I heard Minnie Riperton, Adventures in Paradise, and like all these records I hadn't heard. And then I was emailing Aki and saying, I want to work here. Can you hire me? Because those are the moments you live for as a creative person, is when everything feels fresh and new again. So, but that's an institution for people. Like he sells records still to this day, and has been doing so for 20 years, because people can rely on him, because he's so passionate, to have those unique sounds and those unique experiences that they're looking for, which, as Richard says, are invaluable, because creativity does exist in each and every one of us. particularly inspired by what he said about innovating the service industry, because I worked in the service industry from the age of 12 to 18 as a chambermaid at the hotel that my mother was the manager of. And I do feel that there's an intense creativity that exists in the world of labor and in the world of building things. My father's a stonemason, and there's a creativity that exists within all of our brains, you know what I mean? Depending on which side of our brains we use. And I think there's so much ground to cover still in that.
So if you were launching your career now, you couldn't afford to move to Toronto. Like, you couldn't afford the rents there. So how does the service class remain creative and remain in our cities? Because that's like one of the most important things. The creative class are getting driven out because of these higher rents. Yeah,
I mean, I think new places are popping up that perhaps you wouldn't. Okay, for instance, I just finished recording my album in Dallas, Texas. Okay, so I'm recording with a producer who has chosen not to move to LA, has chosen not to move to New York, and to stay in Dallas, Texas, because there are great musicians there who are a product of their environment.
And is that also a product of real estate costs?
Yeah, because there's no state tax. Yeah. Okay. And so artists can still live there for very cheap. And I've met a lot of these artists. I've met artists from New York, more than one actually. They moved from New York to Dallas specifically because not only financial reasons, but also because they craved a growing city. They might have even been from a place where perhaps they could afford to live or had reasonable jobs, but they just were tired of the hustle and were tired that it wasn't giving them that thing that you need in a city in growth, in growth. And product of the environment, a lot of the musicians that played on my record, they're so good because they've grown up playing in these large churches on Sundays, because that's the steady paying gig for musicians in Dallas. So I found that really interesting, because I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? They play every style, but and then anywhere where you have these, like, this juxtaposition is always this really, really cool energy. Of people flocking there, and great things can come out of that, I think, you know, because even smaller cities have unique energy that is never really fully, like, you haven't squeezed the juice out of it yet, you know.
So you moved from a small city to a big city to launch your career, and now artists are leaving big cities and going to smaller cities to launch their careers. And is that working out for artists, or what do you think cities can do? To keep artists?
Oh, geez, I think it has to be about fusion. Like, I think there have been some really great developments recently in Toronto. I mean, I was at the Daniel Spectrum, and I'm friendly with some of the poets and artists that have come up through the community of Regent Park, which is traditionally, like 20 years ago, Regent Park in Toronto was like a super, like, low-income neighborhood, a lot of assisted living, things like that. So anyway, I know a poet. His name is Mustafa Ahmed, and he's grown up in that community as a mentor, mentoring at-risk youth. Now, they've kind of developed the city, and they have this huge structure called the Daniel Spectrum. And I went to go see a production by Aki Theater of a piece by Cliff Cardinal. It was called Huff, and it was about his life growing up on a First Nations reserve. And it was a great, vibrant piece, and a lot of people from the community come to experience culture there. So I think that's an example of, like, you've got your gallery, you've got housing, you've got condos. So there's a fusion happening. You're attracting people to these neighborhoods that wouldn't normally be there in that particular neighborhood, because they're there for, like, a cultural experience, or perhaps a play or a theater company or an art show or a gallery show, or perhaps they're involved in some type of nonprofit work. I mean, I don't really have a linear view on cities, because I've traveled to places like rural Kenya, where I experience music and culture in a rural setting, which is also vibrant. And I've met visual artists in the middle of rural Kenya, like in Narok, Kenya, who their work is informed by multiculturalism still, though.
So how?
Because,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm talking over you.
No, it's great. It's good.
Okay.
So wait, getting back to Miami real quick, how does the geography of Miami influence music?
Geography. Woo.
Like, it doesn't have public transportation. It is walkable, has great weather.
That's an issue.
It does have.
You can't have a subway here.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can't have a subway. The subway was a big part of my career.
Or has the city in any way affected your musical sounds?
Most definitely. I mean, I recorded an entire album here, so I think I'm kind of a city junkie, I think. Like, I recorded an album in Dallas, and now I recorded an album in Miami, but...
Yeah, talk to us about the differences of those of working
Miami,
in those different cities.
Yes,
Like,
of
how
course.
does that
the culture
happen?
completely informed that record because, God, I even, you know, from the visuals and everything, from the palm trees to the white everywhere, you know, it's like, it's an aesthetic. And it's also about nightlife. So, you know, you come to Miami and, I mean, the Miami of 10 years ago is different than the Miami of today, but I think it's an energy kind of pulsing in there. And also the location of the studio we recorded at was kind of in a, what's that neighborhood called?
Wynwood
Where
or
the Hit Factory
Design
is.
District or the downtown? North Miami Beach.
North Miami Beach. So in the particular neighborhood that the studio is in, there was probably police cars across the street. In the building across the street, like probably I recorded there for 3 months and probably like 3 to 4 times maybe in 4 months. I don't know if that's normal. I haven't ever lived here for very long. For me, it was very inspiring being here. Probably because it was the first time I was kind of among, you know, more Hispanic people because I'm Portuguese, I'm Hispanic. So I'm here and all of a sudden everybody speaks Spanish, which I also learned. I learned Portuguese, but I also learned Spanish growing up. And it was nice to be around other Hispanic people and just to kind of feel free in that. And also, it never felt American to me. Miami never felt like an American city.
It does not feel like you're in America
I don't feel like I'm
actually,
in the USA when I'm here. I feel like it's a unique little
and
republic.
that's interesting
the Republic
about
of
cities,
Miami.
As cities maintain their authenticity and their culture, I mean, that's really important. But a lot of cities are starting to be the same. Like, for instance, Richard and I went to Shanghai, and I asked our client, like, can you take us to see the Shanghai and the neighborhood and the culture and the heritage? And they drove us by this beautiful outdoor mall, and it had a Tiffany's and a Nike and a Starbucks, and I said, well, can you take us to the real Shanghai? And so they take us to another square, and there's a big Starbucks in the middle of the square. So how does culture and authenticity of cities really help your music or influence your music?
Well, this time I recorded a lot of my record too. I flew out some of the musicians from Dallas, and we did a lot in the East End, which is developing as well. So I think I'm attracted to the developing parts of the city, and I always have.
And why is that? Because it's raw and gritty.
Yes,
and
because
it
you walk
unleashes your creativity.
Yes, you walk for a block, and like you just see stuff that's just makes you look twice.
And you're
like,
inspired.
whether it's like with a graffiti on the wall.
And it's not all the
perfect,
same,
or
clean,
or just like the individuals that live in that city, or perhaps the people that live in those communities and the different energy depending where you go in a city as sort of large as Toronto. I think that, I mean, and then people identify with those things, right? Oh, I'm from the East End, I'm from the West End, and there's a real, and that's increasing. Like, people are getting really sort of like, not territorial, but just kind of proud of their boroughs, I guess.
Yeah. And so most cities like New York or LA or even Nashville has an extensive network of experts in the music industry, but you're not necessarily gravitating to those cities. You're looking for more kind of raw, developing cities because it gives you more of a creative energy and vibe. And are those experts also then ending up in those cities, the developing cities?
I would say,
like, do you find a team to work with?
Not necessarily. It just depends. Like, it depends on a person's personal preference. I've met some people who just would rather stay and keep on developing their city. They would rather stay and kind of see where the chips fall, or perhaps they don't have the desire or urge to move to a different city. I mean, I have another friend who moved from New York to LA specifically because he wanted to be a part of the growing downtown LA scene, you know, and he's found that connection there. He's a photographer. And so I think and then again, another artist who moved from New York to be in Dallas because she didn't know anyone, you know, a visual artist. So for me personally, it does happen a lot. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Like, a lot of people who are really talented, they go where the success is. You know what I mean? They want to go and conquer new frontiers. So luckily for musicians, you can stay in Toronto because there's still a lot of opportunity everywhere.
So Richard, my husband who you met earlier, is also a guitarist, and he talks about cities and music as being the canary in the coal mine for economic development, prosperity. Yeah. Do you think the rise of music scenes like Seattle grunge, for instance, is an indicator of a city's up-and-coming success?
I mean, I think it can be. I mean, I think we can't exist without music. Civilization, you know, has never sort of existed without music. So, and it's easy for me to say because I'm a musician. I can't live without music, but I mean, I've seen the vibrancy and potency of it in certain cities for sure. Is it the nucleus? I mean, I'm gonna put myself out on a limb and say yes. I think so. Yeah.
So are the things that you look for in a city from your musical perspective different from your quality of life, family perspective? So you have a daughter, for instance. What do you what do you look for in a city to make it livable for you and your daughter and your family, your partner?
Culture, really. That's important to me. Culture and creativity. So what does that mean? It means, like, you know, one summer we're in Pompeii because my daughter was studying that in school. And then, you know, a year later, you know, the Pompeii moves to the museum down the street. And you're like, wow, I guess we didn't need to go all the way to Pompeii. There's a great exhibit right down the street. So, yeah, you know, and it really, it's about the eclecticism, you know? It's about the fact that, you know, she can experience that multiculturalism. She can experience the richness and the opportunity, and also the sophistication of thought, the consciousness. And it's beautiful to live in a city with a large creative class. It's amazing. Yeah. I love it. It instigates growth and excitement and a great healthy mind space. Yeah. It's a great ecology, you know, to live in your mind.
And you're a global citizen, so what are those cities that you feel connected to, that you're part of, that you're part of the community?
That's a good question.
Toronto, of course.
Yeah, Toronto I'm connected to, and Miami, and of course, like, Victoria and Vancouver I'm originally from. I'm from the West Coast in BC. Portugal as well. My parents are from San Miguel Azores, and I think the Azores is going to continue to be it's already an eco tourism destination, but I think it's just going to get better. But again, obviously, you know, service has to become more innovative. But it's absolutely beautiful. And what I believe to be the remains of Atlantis, but that's just me.
So which cities do you think now have up-and-coming music scenes?
You know what? I've got a good friend named Tony Duncan who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and he's a First Nations hoop dancer. And I brought him out on tour with me around the world. So he came, and everywhere we went, no matter what city we were in, he'd have, like, especially in North America, he'd have relatives come and dance on stage with me, hoop dancers.
With, like, a hula hoop, or what's a hoop dancer?
They're kind of shaped like hula hoops, but you make shapes with them. You make, could be an eagle or different types of shapes, and it's very much a celebration of life, representing balance. And he would always say, you know, because I featured him in the music video as well, and he would say, you know, people are loving this video in Indian country. And that's what he'd say. So you know what? Maybe it's not about individual places and cities. Maybe it's not about that at all, you know? I think it's just about ideas, and where we geographically kind of express them certainly amounts to magic. But I do think it's kind of deeper than that on an unconscious level as well.
And which cities, if you had to pick, because we're running out of time here, but if you had to pick two cities that you would leave Toronto from, where would you choose?
Oh, God. Geez, I don't know. Move from Toronto, probably. Oh, that's a hard one.
All right, you're not leaving Toronto.
We almost moved here like 10 times, but we almost moved to Miami 10 times. But
and what changed that decision?
Probably just
not the weather, because the weather is way better than in Toronto.
It's quite hot though.
Yeah, that's true.
My husband purposely took me on a bike ride in the middle of July so I'd get heat stroke and decide not to move here. But that's the truth. It's actually really hot here sometimes. I was in Santiago recently, and that was pretty amazing. They're doing a lot there for innovation in cities and businesses. Yeah. So that's a great city. Well, I'm not moving there, but it's good.
Any last thoughts? I know we're running out of time, and we're so excited to have you here and join us today. And I think everyone's a big fan of your music. But any last thoughts about the creative class in cities?
I just think that it's important work, and I thank you all for taking part in it, because it's like it's really important work that you're doing. It's incredible, and I love the theme of hope. I think it's really important, because I wake up, I'm grateful every day, every time I'm in my city, and I say, wow, look, I can walk outside and, you know, drive my daughter to a hockey game. You know, like this is awesome. Like, how privileged am I? You know, or like go to like the Santa Claus parade. I'm at a public parade where people are just celebrating life. Like, that's a gift. So we shouldn't take it for granted. We should celebrate it and develop our cities further, because they're all we have, and our cities belong to all of us. You know, when something horrible happens in one neighborhood and somebody gets abused or beaten or is a victim of violence, you know, that happens in Toronto all the time, and even coming from a horrible place ideologically. I mean, that's my neighborhood too. You know, we're all sharing space. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thanks for coming out on your birthday. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.